Part 8. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 71. Something's happened, hurry up, Xiu shouted, and then rushed towards the main entrance without any scruples, with no intention of hiding at all. Yutu was also distracted by the shout, and was stunned for a few seconds before following him. Xiu walked forward quickly and arrived at the front door in a few seconds. He pushed the door open and shouted inside. "What are you doing? Stop it!" The two people who were arguing were stunned and turned to look here almost at the same time. The next second, Shirley suddenly took a step forward for some reason, and then tilted her whole body towards Channa. The atmosphere between the two was already very tense. Xiu's shout just now almost brought out Kana's soul. Now Shirley suddenly made such a move to tease her tense nerves. Under such stimulation, Channa's brain subconsciously resisted Shirley's approach, and in response to her body movements, she raised her hands to block her body, and then pushed her away at the moment of contact. I just don't know why, but when her hand came into contact with Shirley, Shirley seemed to have lost her balance. Her hands and feet struggled wildly, but to no avail. She fell backwards uncontrollably, and then hit the ground with a loud bang. There was a muffled sound. Channa was stunned when she saw Shirley's condition, but the next scene frightened her even more. Shirley didn't get up, but remained motionless and didn't react at all. Before Channa could react further, a shout full of rage came from her ears. "What are you doing?" Kana's whole body trembled, and she suddenly turned her head to look over there, and found Yuto looking at her, with anger on his face. Kana subconsciously wanted to say something, but Vulpix suddenly jumped out and rushed in Kana's direction. In this situation, it was not only people who were highly nervous, but also the elves. Seeing the Vulpix's protruding face, Ibrahimovic subconsciously wanted to protect the trainer, and stretched out his sharp claws to grab the Vulpix. "Don't!" Kana also noticed this and was about to stop him, but Ibrahimovic couldn't take back his action and knocked Vulpix upside down. "You're still fighting after this?" Xiu whispered something to the side, which completely ignited Yuto's passion. He only heard him shout, "Go!" Hearing this, the cutty dog rushed into the house like a whirlwind. Ibrahimovic's dexterous posture was completely useless in the face of the absolute power. Before he could react, he was slapped away by Cutty Dog. He flew backwards and hit the wall to stop his castration. But looking at the way Ibrahimovic collapsed on the ground, he was almost dead. "Evie," Channa exclaimed when she saw this, but before she could make any more moves, the Cutty Dog came to her side. The fluffy hair and the grinning teeth were full of aggression. She looked a little panicked and couldn't help but take 2 steps back. At this time, Yuto and Xiu also rushed over. There is no bleeding, and the signs of life are stable. He was probably comatose due to hitting the back of the head. Xiu retracted his hand from Shirley's neck and looked up at Yuto. "It may be a concussion. Don't touch Shirley first. I'll notify the principal to come back and ask who did to be sent to the hospital. You can deal with it first." After saying that, he turned to look at Channa, who had not yet recovered from the shock. After saying that, he rushed into the house and quickly walked upstairs to the office. When he opened the office door, his steps slowed down again, and his whole demeanor changed from the eagerness just now, and instead seemed a bit casual. "Director, my task is completed, now it's time to see your performance." That's right, Nabaoba was standing by the window looking outside, and Huda was right next to him. It was obvious that he had seen everything just now. "Don't worry yet." Baoba still looked the same, without even turning his head, looking extremely calm, as if the people below were not his grandchildren. He was no longer in a hurry, and Jiu was naturally not in a hurry either. He walked slowly to the window and listened to the quarrel below. "Get out of here. I really didn't mean it. She fell down on her own. I saw you push her with my own eyes, and now you are still trying to lie to me." No. I didn't. I actually believed you before? I'm so stupid, get out of here right now. I didn't notice that so many things happened to Shirley. Baoba looked away and said to himself. He turned to Xiu and asked, how did you know that Kana would be here at this time? Today, Thursday, the class she went home to make up for after school was an art class, and she finished it an hour earlier than she should have. Her personality is not like Shirley's, who likes to lie on the sofa and watch TV. She is the kind of person who likes to show off, rest. When I was young, I liked to take Ibrahimovic around outside. Before wandering around, there is a high probability that he will come here to bring bad luck to Shirley as usual. This may put her in a good mood. This information will become clear after talking to Yudo Shirley, it is not a secret. These are nothing, but do you guarantee that she will eat sugar water? Because she likes sweet food, and training makes her hungry, she won't wait until we come back to eat together, or she will eat one portion first and then another portion when we come back. At that time, I had already tidied up the kitchen. With her lazy personality, she would not pick up another bowl. She would definitely use the one next to her. Xiu leaned against the window and talked, obviously having figured out Shirley's actions. You guys, those dirty words Shirley said today were also taught by you, right? This is just language art, not a swear word. Xiu didn't seem to care much, and said casually, what's more, Shirley's emotions have accumulated until now, I just gave her a way to vent. The two chatted casually, but there was a new change below. I don't know what they said, but Channa picked up the half-dead EV and cried and left the front yard. Seeing this, Xiu hurriedly said to Baoba, Director, it's your turn. Baoba didn't say anything, turned his head to look at Alakazam, and disappeared in the next second. Seeing this, Xiu restrained his expression, turned around and walked down slowly. When he went downstairs, he didn't go out immediately, but went to the kitchen to wash the bowl, and then went out. Xiu looked at Yudo, who was standing aside, and comforted him. The director took her to the hospital, she will be fine. I'm such a fool. How could I not even notice this? Xiu looked at him and was speechless. It was normal for Yudo's straightforward character to be defeated by Channa. But he couldn't just watch Yudo get excited and look a little ferocious. Seeing this, Xiu quickly said, let's not talk about this now, let's go to the hospital first. Then he pulled him outside. After hearing what he said, Yudo also understood the sequence of events and quickly followed. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 72. Qianhong City Hospital, Independent Ward. Hey, it's done. Xiu handed over the peeled fruit. Although Shirley was lying on the bed in a hospital gown at this time, she showed no signs of injury at all. Instead, she was very energetic and even a little excited. When she saw the fruit handed over by Xiu, she sat up from the bed, took a bite, and asked, tell me what happened to that guy after I fainted. Xiu looked at her when he heard this, with a smile on his face, and said casually, haven't I told you several times? You didn't really hit your head. You hit your head. Shirley rolled her eyes at Xiu, turned to face Xiu, then crossed her legs, looked like she wanted to listen to a story, and asked Xiu in a coquettish tone, hurry up. All right, all right. I'll tell you, isn't it okay? Xiu raised his hand in front of him and pressed down, looking like he couldn't stand it. The director came back after you fainted yesterday. No, I want to listen to that guy. Listen to me first. Xiu knew what Shirley wanted to hear, and his smile remained. That day, the director came back and sent you to the hospital. Your brother and I had just arrived not long ago. You were still not awake at that time, and her parents brought Channa here. You don't know how angry Yudo was at that time. He listed her crimes in front of her parents, and she didn't dare to say a word. She deserves it. Let her bully me all day long. Shirley didn't feel any pity when she heard Channa's miserable condition. Instead, she wished she was there and joined the quarrel. Xiu looked at her excited look and didn't say much. He just sat aside with a faint smile on his face. After Shirley finished complaining, Xiu slowly put away the smile on his face, and then said, "You will be discharged from the hospital tomorrow, and then go to the elf center to fight Chanel." When he said this, Shirley was stunned, looking at Xiu stupidly, and it took several seconds for her to react and asked, "Why so fast? This is the best opportunity. If you grasp it, you may be able to defeat her. Otherwise, at your current pace, you will never catch up with her." Xiu did not explain, but simply threw out the result. "Yeah," although Shirley was puzzled, she agreed after a moment of silence, and then asked Xiu nervously, "You will help me, right?" Yes. Xiu met her eyes and nodded heavily. "Elf Center, training ground, audience seats. She's over there." Xiu looked at Chanel, who stood up from her seat, and his tone was a little abnormal. Shirley looked over immediately after Xiu's words, and the whole person didn't know why she started to get nervous. "Don't be afraid." Xiu seemed to have noticed her change, and whispered to her side, "I'm here. I'm not afraid." Shirley smiled reluctantly and defended, "Are we really not going to tell Grandpa and the others? They can't save you." Xiu naturally knew what she was thinking, and joked, "Your brother will definitely not let you go up, so for your sake I can only hide it from him. As for the headmaster, he is busy, don't bother him." Shirley lowered her head as if she had accepted her fate. "Don't be afraid." Xiu raised his hand to support her forehead and pushed her up, smiling and comforting, "I'm not sure I won't let you do this, just leave it to Vulpix later, don't give random orders." Shirley listened to Xiu's inexplicable words, and before she could react more, she heard a voice in her ear. She moved. Shirley subconsciously looked up, and sure enough, Channa got up and walked towards the field below. "Go." Xiu patted Shirley on the back and pushed her up. Shirley realized that she had stood up, and looked back at Xiu in a daze. Xiu gave her a look, and then looked at the field. Shirley looked back, and she didn't know when, that Chanel was actually looking over here. "If you don't leave now, you'll be laughed at," Xiu said sinisterly. Shirley's face tightened when she heard it, and she walked down with her head held high. Chanel looked at the newcomer and didn't say anything, but from her expression, it can be seen that she no longer had the sense of superiority towards Shirley as before, but instead seemed very timid. When the two got closer, Chanel asked in a low voice, "What are you doing here?" Shirley still has some advantages. Her carefree personality allows her to adapt to the environment quickly, especially when she finds that Chanel's attitude towards her is not as confident as before. "Of course it's a battle," Shirley said, not forgetting to imitate what Xiu taught her, and added in a sarcastic tone, "Why, or are you afraid?" The person who used to be submissive in front of her suddenly became rampant one day, which was unbearable for ordinary people, let alone the pampered and bad-tempered Channa. Now she didn't care about her parents' instructions, and stared at Shirley viciously. "You provoked it yourself, don't regret it." After saying that, Channa walked into the field. Shirley looked back at Xiu in the audience, and only entered the field when she saw him smiling and nodding at her. And Channa's original opponent just stood there, watching Shirley occupy her position. The changes here also attracted the teacher's attention, but he was very clear about the identities of the two people on the field, and didn't dare to say anything more, just hoping that nothing would happen. "Come out." Evie. Channa released the elf first, and her calm and stable appearance was obviously different from the state just now. Not to be outdone, Shirley threw her pokeball and summoned Vulpix. At this time, the two trainers and the elf were ready, and the referee didn't waste any words. The red flag in his left hand pointed at Shirley, and the blue flag pointed at Channa, and then he raised his hands at the same time. "Red Vulpix, blue Evie, get ready." Shirley subconsciously glanced at the auditorium, but suddenly found that Xiu was missing. After scanning around, he still could not find him. In this situation, her entire brain seemed to have shut down and she completely lost her ability to think. At this time, the flag in the referee's hand has been waved down, accompanied by a start. This sound brought Shirley back to the field, but she didn't have the confidence she had just now. Instead, the panic could be seen on her face. But Kana didn't care about her. She raised her hand and pointed at Vulpix and shouted, "Up!" After receiving the order, Ibrahimovic suddenly rushed out, and his figure was like a sharp arrow, piercing the Vulpix. Shirley's expression changed when she saw this, and she was about to speak, but she remembered what Jiu had said before, so she could only suppress the words that came to her lips. The tense atmosphere at this time also left her no time to take care of other things. She could only stare at Ibrahimovic with her eyes wide open. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 73. Unlike Shirley's fussing look, Vulpix looked very calm, leaning down and staring at the fast-moving Eevee. The moment Ibrahimovic approached, he exerted force to the side and jumped away from the place. The next second, Ibrahimovic's claws were swung at that position. It was only because of the timely escape of Vulpix that the one he was determined to win missed. The loss of force caused by hitting the air caused the balance of the body to be destroyed. The original attacked the state of falling forward. Fortunately, Ibrahimovic was agile and quickly adjusted, but it also completely ended the attack. When Shirley saw Vulpix like this, she naturally knew that Jiu's training had worked, and she couldn't help but feel secretly happy. I'm also glad that I didn't give random instructions just now, otherwise Vulpix might not be able to escape if he was disturbed. On the opposite side, Channa's face became serious when she saw this situation. Only her Vulpix could dodge Eevee's attacks. Although she was a little confused, it did not prevent her from continuing to organize the attack and directed Ibrahimovic, use lightning flash to end the game. Ibrahimovic turned around, white light erupted from his body, and then accelerated instantly, pulling out a white flash and heading straight for Vulpix. This time the speed was even better than before. Before Shirley even reacted, she only saw a white rainbow light passing through the field. But something strange happened. When the light dissipated, Ibrahimovic appeared on the field, and Vulpix was also unharmed on the other side. The emergence of this situation deepened Channa's doubts, and at the same time strengthened Shirley's confidence. At least she was not as panicked as when she first entered the venue. Come again, Kana called out to Ibrahimovic as if she didn't believe it. In a corner of the auditorium, Shiu looked at the battle and muttered to himself. It seems the training is still effective. When he finished speaking, someone next to him actually took over. You didn't feed. No, there was an extra item as Shiu flipped his fingers and he played with it casually. Shirley is not stupid. If she uses this kind of thing, she will definitely find that the battle will depend on her concept. Potion instead of hard training, then she will always lose to Chanel. As he spoke, Shiu stopped moving his hand, closed all his fingers, and then slowly opened his fingers to reveal the potion inside. Presumably the director doesn't want Shirley to become that kind of person, right? After finishing speaking, Shiu turned to look at Baoba beside him and handed over the potion in his hand. You keep it. Baoba glanced at the potion in Shiu's hand, then raised his hand to press it down, and returned to the field. Shiu was not polite and put the things away directly, and also looked at the battle on the field. After just looking back and forth for a few times, Baoba asked curiously, "How did you come up with this?" Shiu looked at the battle below and explained casually. Eevee was raised well, but no matter what, it is just an elf in its infancy. Limited by its physical development, the gap between it and the Vulpix is actually not that big. It's just Shirley's laziness that drags down the Vulpix. just collapsed. I have watched Eevee's battles and know its fighting methods and strengths and weaknesses. Naturally, I understand how to use this to give Vulpix the ability to fight against it. Baoba didn't respond, but Xiu continued. Similarly, Vulpix's most powerful ability should be the fire element, but it is limited by development and cannot be used. So when facing Ibrahimovic, who has a better body, if he chooses to collide with his body, he will only be seeking death, just like it was Shirley who was tortured and killed just like her previous battle. So I chose another direction. In view of Ibrahimovic's fighting style that likes to burst into faces, I trained Vulpix's dodge ability through high-intensity training, so that it could have the ability to dodge Ibrahimovic's attacks in a short period of time. In fact, Vulpix does not have the speed to avoid Eevee. The key is to predict. You can only predict Ibrahimovic's movements and avoid them in advance, instead of just following the opponent's speed, and then pull as much as possible between the opponent's attacks. Keep your distance and give yourself time to react next time. Although Vulpix worked hard and made significant progress, the time was still too short. Xiu suddenly laughed bitterly as he spoke, shook his head slightly before continuing. I can only use some special methods for this. Is this why you arranged for Kadi Dog to attack Ibrahimovic? Baobaba turned to look at Xiu. There's nothing I can do. Since strengthening myself is met with resistance, I can only weaken the enemy. Xiu didn't feel embarrassed about being exposed, nor did he feel any emotions like guilt. Instead, he seemed very normal. The Kadi Dog's palm directly broke its bones. Even with the skills of the Elf Center, it still needs time to recover. So before its injury is completely healed, Shirley has the best chance of winning. Xiu said, looking at the battle on the field, and said in a slightly frivolous tone. The longer the Vulpix drags on, the more serious Ibrahimovic's injury feedback will be. Isn't it like this below? Baobaba looked at the battle below and said casually, unless Kana is as stupid as Shirley, escaping will not allow Vulpix to defeat Ibrahimovic. The difference in strength between the two is too big. Xiu listened to Baoba complaining about Shirley, but he didn't expect that he was more cruel than him. Of course you can't defeat your opponent by escaping, but what if escaping is just a means? While the two were chatting, after several back and forths, the two exchanged unknown directions. At this time, both looked tired. The Eevee didn't run as smoothly as it did at the beginning, especially its right front leg, which was out of shape. Get close to it and don't let it leave. Force it to the corner. No matter how stupid Channa was, she realized that if it dragged on like this, the outcome would become unclear, not to mention that she was much smarter than Shirley in the battle. After confirming that the previous attack was ineffective, she knew that she had to change her attack method. Eevee changed its previous attack method of rushing to the face, and instead walked forward slowly, constantly squeezing the activity space of Vulpix. And Vulpix seemed to be at a loss for what to do with its sudden change in attack method, and could only passively dodge. Seeing that it was about to be forced out of the battle area, it could only look back at the edge of the field frequently. And it happened that a turn exposed its vulnerable parts. The trained Eevee was naturally good at seizing opportunities. After noticing the flaw, it suddenly accelerated and rushed over. Shirley on the field couldn't help but exclaimed when she saw this, and her hand couldn't help but reach out to Vulpix. When Connie saw this, she couldn't help but smile in triumph, with a hint of viciousness in her eyes. She was the one who started the fight, so if Vulpix got hurt or died, it couldn't be her fault. It's over. Xiu stopped talking halfway, looking at the situation on the field, with the corners of his mouth slightly raised. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 74. Ibrahimovic flew forward, revealing its small but sharp fangs as it opened, biting hard at the neck that Vulpix had exposed when it turned around. Once bitten by Ibrahimovic, Vulpix would have no chance of struggling in the face of its absolute physical advantage, and the results of its previous efforts to dodge would seem like a joke. Channa seemed to have noticed something, and her face suddenly changed drastically. She no longer looked confident of winning, and shouted forward. "No!" Ibrahimovic suddenly heard a cry of surprise, but the familiar voice did not shake it. Its eyes were full of the coldness of hunting, because the prey was already in front of it. The next second, Ibrahimovic saw Vulpix twisting again. At this moment, the two looked at each other. Ibrahimovic did not see the panic of the prey in Vulpix's eyes, but instead revealed a sense of teasing. And what came into view was the orange light that had been brewing in its mouth for a long time, and this light continued to expand in front of its eyes until it completely swallowed up its vision. Bang! A sudden explosion sounded on the field, attracting the attention of the audience. People only saw a fireball rolling on the field for a few rounds. When the flames went out, a figure with the charred front half of its body struggled to get up from the ground, but its originally fluffy hair was burned out, leaving only ugly charred skin. The figure just now was still the winner recognized by the audience, but in the blink of an eye, it became so embarrassed. And what about the weaker party just now? It was squatting on the spot, slowly dancing its tail, looking coldly at the charred opponent. From time to time, one or two sparks would be brought out during breathing. Baobab looked at the situation that had changed in an instant and couldn't help asking, "Is this your trump card?" "I call this move looking back at the moon." Chiu explained with a rather smug expression on his face. "I know very well that Vulpix can't do enough damage to Eevee with either its claws or teeth, because Eevee has a thick coat of hair, especially the mane on its neck, and it can't bite anything but hair. But these dense hairs can resist such physical damage, but they also have a weakness, that is, once they encounter fire, the situation is reversed. Not only can the hair not protect, but the ignited hair will cause further damage. To some extent, Vulpix still restrains Eevee. It's just that Shirley is too lame. She hasn't developed Vulpix's potential for such a long time, which led to Vulpix only knowing how to spit fire a few days ago, sparks, not to mention the time required to release it." Bob, who was standing by, couldn't help but twitch his face when he heard Chiu complaining about Shirley, but he didn't say anything and let Chiu continue. "Because there is a pre-release swing, and Eevee reacts faster than Vulpix and moves more nimbly. If you release it carelessly, Eevee is likely to dodge, which will also further consume Vulpix's physical strength. So in order to hit the target with one blow and cause the greatest damage to Eevee, I must constantly improve Vulpix's proficiency, shorten the preparation time, and reduce the noise of preparation." Speaking of this, Chiu sighed and said slowly, "Alas, unfortunately, the time is still too short." Baoba did not respond, and Chiu did not respond, and continued to talk to himself. "So I must take shortcuts and find ways to buy time and space for Vulpix." At this time, Baoba took over the topic. "So you hid it from Shirley from the beginning and designed the scene with Vulpix. The director should know that if Shirley knew, she would definitely not be able to bear that moment, and all my arrangements and preparations are for this moment." Baoba has completely lost interest in the situation below, and instead looked at Chiu and explained with interest. "Hide the true strength of Vulpix to reduce the opponent's defense, consume the opponent's physical strength and patience by dodging and delaying, and then gradually lead the opponent into the scene that has been prepared long ago, sell the flaws to lure Eevee to take action, let it take the initiative to close the distance between the two, and at the same time hide Vulpix's actions through the perspective of the position, and then finally explode. At this time Vulpix has completely lost the physical strength and reaction distance to dodge. It can be said that you thought of the reactions of Channa and Vulpix at every step, and then set a sweet trap to lure it into it." As he said, Baoba suddenly asked curiously, "What if Vulpix doesn't follow your idea?" "I still have a backup plan, but doesn't the current situation mean that I did nothing wrong?" Chiu looked at the situation below and didn't say much. Eevee was still able to stand up despite such a heavy blow, which shows that its foundation is good, but Vulpix did not give it time to recover, and kept trying to harass it, using crazy fake moves to affect Evie's body that was already tortured by pain, forcing it to tighten its nerves. There was absolutely no chance. When Shirley saw her advantage, she naturally taunted the opponent crazily, and did not give Channa any face at all. Channa could only stand there with a sullen face, staring at the situation on the field. From the way Vulpix looked, she knew that she had no chance of winning, and if it dragged on, Evie would definitely lose. But it would be more painful for her to admit defeat to Shirley than to kill her. This was impossible. Sure enough, Evie was dragged down by Vulpix's harassment tactics in a short while, closed his eyes, and fell to the ground in exhaustion, with only his still rising and falling chest proving that he was still alive. When the referee saw this scene, he directly raised the red flag in his left hand. Evie has lost his ability to fight, and the red team wins. The victory was decided, but instead of the usual cheers, there was silence in the audience. From the perspective of outsiders, this battle is not entertaining at all. It is just delays and tricks, and there is absolutely no passion that an elf battle should have. In the eyes of those students, Shirley, a low achiever who often skipped classes and could not be beaten by anyone, could actually defeat the top student Channa. This is too. But Shirley couldn't care about that and rushed onto the field, raising Vulpix and cheering heartily. Yeah. We won. We won. Defeating Channa brought her endless joy. At this moment, she cleared away the long-standing haze in her heart, and her whole person seemed to be a different person. Kana put away Ibrahimovic expressionlessly, glanced at her opponent, and then left the place without saying a word. But even Jiu in the audience could feel the resentment in her eyes just now. Director, this Chanel doesn't seem to have let go of this matter. It's a bit difficult. You'd better go see Shirley, this guy. Baoba got a headache when he saw Shirley's crazy look and hurriedly left his seat. Seeing this, Xiu could only curl his lips and walk down. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 75. Okay, come down. Xiu stepped forward and dragged Shirley off the court. Shirley was still a little excited at this moment, but she certainly had not forgotten that Xiu disappeared at the beginning. Where did you go just now? Didn't you watch from above? It's just that I changed to a closer position. Didn't you see it? Xiu pointed to the audience. Is it? Shirley looked over there with some doubt. But before she could react more, Xiu changed the question and asked, so are you happy now that you won? Shirley really forgot about Xiu's disappearance when she heard this, and excitedly explained to Xiu the change in Chanel's expression just now. Did you see it just now? Her face was black. Let's go home first. On the way home, Shirley didn't know how many times she repeated those words, which was simply torture for Xiu. Fortunately, the house was close. Xiu saw it and said to Shirley, you go back first. I have something to do. Remember to take good care of Vulpix. It was very hard just now. I know, Shirley agreed, lowered her head and smiled at Vulpix in her arms. Let's go back and eat. Xiu looked at her cheerful back, shook his head slightly, and turned to leave. I'm afraid Shirley doesn't know that Yuto is looking for her. Shirley returned home happily, but as soon as she opened the door, she rushed in. Stop. A serious voice came, and Shirley seemed to be controlled by a spell. She stood there in a daze, and even her movements were frozen. And the originally hot brain seemed to be poured with a plate of cold water, and it woke up instantly. She didn't forget that she had kept this matter secret from her brother and grandfather. Shirley subconsciously looked back, and then she remembered that Xiu had run away to somewhere long ago, and for a while she could only bite the bullet and walk into the house. As expected, Yuto was sitting in the living room, and his expression was extremely serious. You still remember to go home. This made Shirley dare not move any more, and she stood at the entrance of the living room and laughed awkwardly. Where did you go? I went out for a walk. Went to the Pokemon Center? And went to fight. What Pokemon Center? Shirley was about to play dumb, but Yuto killed her with one move. The school teacher came to the door. What do you think? This. Shirley's strong side was revealed. She was originally aggrieved, but then she became strong and said, so what if I went to the Pokemon Center? So what if I went to the battle? Are you reluctant to leave her? Do you want to bully me with her? After Shirley said these words, Yuto's face changed. His originally serious expression became a little awkward. He said in a stiff tone, you just came back from the hospital. The doctor told you not to move around and to rest more. You only know how to blame me. Shirley was relentless. Are you worried about your childhood sweetheart again? Or do you want to bully me with her? Yuto couldn't even speak, and his face was obviously anxious. He had done evil before and owed Shirley too much. Now he really didn't have the confidence to say anything to his sister. Shirley saw Yuto like this and said arrogantly, I'm telling you, your childhood sweetheart has been defeated by me. You don't know. What are you doing? A voice interrupted Shirley's words. The two looked over and saw Xiu coming in from the main door, but their attitudes were completely different at this time. Shirley wanted to maintain her previous domineering attitude and was about to say something, but Xiu glared at her and asked sternly, I asked you to take care of Vulpix, what are you doing? Long-term training made Shirley subconsciously obey his words, and the momentum accumulated just now disappeared. She could only glance at Xiu with a little grievance and carried Vulpix to the sofa. Yuto was surprised that Xiu had the ability to tame Shirley, but he didn't look good to him, because he knew very well that Shirley couldn't do such a thing, let alone defeat Channa. Combined with his sister's abnormal behavior before, Xiu was the only variable. This matter has nothing to do with Shirley, it's all my idea. But before Yuto asked, Xiu took the matter very straightforwardly. Not to mention Yuto was stunned, even Shirley turned around and looked over, her face full of astonishment. Xiu seemed a little casual, and explained. I asked Shirley to keep it a secret from you. That day I saw that girl named Chanel bullying her, and then Shirley asked me to teach her how to fight, so I agreed. Shirley was about to eavesdrop on their conversation, but Xiu stopped after a few simple words, glanced in Shirley's direction, and then said to Yuto, let's go, let's talk. Yuto naturally understood what Xiu meant, and the two of them went out, leaving Shirley alone in the living room. In the studio, Baoba handed over the things. Everything is ready for you. Xiu drank the potion in his hand in one gulp, and then took the things. Thank you, Director. It must be very troublesome if I prepare these myself. Baoba looked at Xiu and couldn't help asking, have you really decided? What? Xiu smiled and teased, Director can't bear to leave me. Huh, Baoba had a strange expression on his face, and he said back, you are a talented boy. You have made Yuto and the others obedient in just these few days, but your messy ideas are too crazy. He couldn't help laughing again and added. But fortunately you didn't agree to me at the beginning, otherwise I would be more worried if you took Yuto with you than if Yuto went alone, because I don't know what trouble you would cause. Look at what the director said, I am a good citizen, how could I do something illegal? Xiu smiled and echoed. Baoba listened to Xiu's words and smiled but didn't say anything. After preparing the things, Xiu left the studio, went to the second floor, and knocked on Shirley's door. Xiu. Come in. Xiu opened the door and went in, and Shirley glanced at him and complained. Why are you here so late? Teach me how to do it here. Xiu didn't answer, but sat down next to Shirley silently. I have something to tell you, and I have to release Vulpix. Shirley turned to look at Xiu with some surprise, but out of trust she did not doubt and released Vulpix. Xiu picked up Vulpix and then said slowly. I want to review today's battle with you, and some key points, and tell you who deserves the most credit for winning the battle today. As Xiu continued speaking, Shirley finally understood everything that Vulpix had to bear today, and the effort it had put in. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 76. You have to remember that today's victory is entirely the result of Vulpix's hard work, and the responsibility will return to you as the trainer. You must study hard and train to help Vulpix grow faster. Otherwise, the shame you inflicted on Kana today will be returned to you tomorrow, because the gap in hard power between Vulpix and Ibrahimovic is there. Today's victory is completely a fluke caused by many factors. Once she is prepared, it would be impossible to replicate today's success. Xiu's words immediately put a huge burden on Shirley. She became gloomy and complained casually. Why didn't you tell me earlier? Ha! Xiu sneered and complained mercilessly, if I give you instructions, do you think you can win? Although Shirley was stunned, she was not stupid. She knew her level very well, so she didn't dare to talk back. Don't forget how you humiliated her today. If you don't work hard, you should know that she will definitely repay you 100-fold. When Xiu mentioned this, Shirley became anxious. She reached out and grabbed Xiu's arm and begged, "You must help me." Xiu stretched out his hand to push Shirley's hand back and said in a deep voice, "This depends on your own efforts. I have done everything I can, and I have completed what I promised you." Shirley's face turned pale when she saw this. Fortunately, Xiu's next words gave her a little hope. "Although I can't help you much, I can leave you with a few suggestions." "Say it quickly." "The first and most important one is to cultivate the Vulpix's fire ability as much as possible. The real strength of the Vulpix lies in the fire ability. It will be a big disadvantage to face Ibrahimovic before it has fully grown up, and once the Vulpix mastering fire skills will reverse this advantage. The second is to avoid fighting. Don't agree to fight Vulpix until she masters Flame Jet, unless you want to make a fool of yourself. Then take advantage of this time to quickly catch up with the opponent. There is something to note here." "What?" "Come on," Shirley asked eagerly when Xiu suddenly stopped. "You definitely can't do it alone. You must make use of all the resources around you. For example, ask Yudu to teach you about fire elf combat, training and skills, and about elf rations and various nutritional supplements. You can ask the director for this." Xiu paused while speaking, and his tone suddenly became serious. "Of these two, I have one request for you, that is, you must take over everything related to Vulpix. The request is not to leave the matter to others. Can you do it?" Shirley immediately seemed a little hesitant, not daring to look at Xiu at all, and her eyes were wandering. Alas, looking at her like this, Xiu knew what she was thinking. The habit she had developed for a long time made her subconsciously choose to escape, and she did not dare to take on her own responsibilities. When Shirley saw Xiu showing such disappointment, she was a little anxious for a moment. She wanted to speak up to prove something, but she didn't dare. She seemed hesitant to speak. But instead of comforting and encouraging her as before, Xiu asked her a question. "Do you feel happy after winning today?" Shirley looked at him in surprise, not knowing what Xiu meant, so she could only say cautiously, "Happy? You should know that Chana will definitely not give up. She will definitely challenge you again. If you want to get that kind of happiness again, you must take your own responsibility, otherwise you will lose no matter what. If you give it to her, you will lose to her for the rest of your life. When it comes to other things, Shirley is submissive, but when it comes to Chanel, she immediately strikes hard. I won't lose to her. I will work hard." Shirley changed her previous attitude and agreed. Xiu looked at her fighting spirit and smiled, then said. Then the first step is to apologize to your brother. Hey, Shirley looked at Xiu with a puzzled look, why? You know exactly what you did. The corners of Xiu's mouth were slightly raised, with a strange expression on his face. Shirley surrendered within 2 seconds after meeting Shang Xiu's eyes, lowered her head and admitted her mistake. I shouldn't do this to him. It's useless for you to tell me. Xiu interrupted her, reached out to hold her cheek, and raised her slightly decadent face. You clearly know how much your relatives care about you, why do you still rely on them to care about you? How about pouring out your anger on them because of your love? I know you are not that kind of person, that's why you have to apologize after you recognize what you have done. Xiu's tone became softer, blowing over Shirley's heart like a breeze. After saying that, Xiu let go of his hands, but Shirley didn't lower her head again. Then go now, apologize to him, and then ask him about the training and cultivation of elves. Xiu had a gentle smile on his face. Shirley didn't know why, but couldn't refuse Xiu's words. The two came to Yuto's room, and Xiu knocked on the door first, not giving Shirley a chance to back down. Who? Listening to the sounds coming from inside, Xiu looked at Shirley with a smile. But at this moment, Shirley felt that this smile was comparable to the devil. But under Xiu's urging eyes, Shirley still gave in. She responded casually and pushed the door open. Yuto, who was studying, showed a hint of surprise on his face when he saw Shirley coming over. He thought it was Xiu or his grandfather. How could it be his sister? What's the matter? That. Shirley felt the embarrassment taking over her mind at this time. Her mouth seemed to be sewn shut, she stammered but couldn't say a complete sentence. Yuto looked at his sister's strange look, and didn't know what she meant, so he could only respond in silence. After a long time, Shirley overcame that feeling and whispered. I'm sorry. For some reason, Yuto's eyes widened instantly when he heard this, and the whole person unconsciously leaned back, and asked, what trouble have you caused again? Obviously in Yuto's mind, the trouble that made Shirley ask him for help must be a huge one. Xiu him. Shirley was also a little strange to see Yuto's reaction, and was about to find an excuse to throw the problem to Xiu. But when Yuto heard Xiu's name, he stood up suddenly and asked anxiously, what did you do to Xiu? Didn't you hurt him? He was about to go out to check on Xiu's condition. And Shirley was disturbed by Yuto, and she didn't feel embarrassed just now. Instead, she was so angry that she stopped Yuto. It was Xiu who came to ask me to apologize to you. Huh? Yuto was stunned, not quite understanding what she meant. Xiu listened to the friendly interaction between the two behind the door and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But it can also be known that the relationship between them has eased, and he turned around and left after completing his task. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 77. Summer mornings are always extremely early, and it's already completely bright before 6 o'clock. Shirley, who was sleeping peacefully in bed, suddenly woke up without any warning. The previous period of training changed her original routine and reshaped her biological clock. In a daze, he touched the alarm clock beside the bed, glanced at the pointer that was just past 6 o'clock, and then threw it aside, muttering something vaguely in his mouth. It's only 6 o'clock. I just don't know why, but an electric current-like stimulation suddenly flashed through my mind. My brain that was not fully awake suddenly woke up, and I quickly got up from the bed. But after I got up, I felt a little confused, because the feeling was gone, but there was always an indescribable weirdness. I was stunned for a few seconds before I realized that Xiudu had knocked on the door at 6 o'clock on time. Why didn't he knock on the door today? Although it was a little strange, I quickly cleaned up, then went out and turned to the guest room. I didn't expect you to be late one day. With a teasing smile on her face, Shirley knocked on the door and shouted casually, why don't you get up? After shouting a few words but getting no response, Shirley subconsciously sensed something was wrong and put her hand on the door lock to open the door. But when she entered, she found that it had been tidied up a long time ago, and the furnishings were neat and clean, as if no one had lived there. "Where's the person?" The person, looking at the scene in front of her, Shirley froze on the spot, feeling like a dream. The next second she rushed out of the door, rushed downstairs, stopped Yadu who was doing morning exercises in the backyard, and spoke anxiously to say something. "Shiu. Shiu, Shiu." But she felt like her brain was stuck and she couldn't speak at all. Instead, her eyes suddenly turned red and glowed with water. "What's wrong?" Yuto looked nervous when he saw his sister's reaction. "Shiu is gone," Shirley shouted with a hint of crying. The water in her eyes could no longer stay and fell downwards. He was obviously there last night and the experience of training together was still fresh in his mind. Why was he gone as soon as he woke up? She was really afraid that this person never existed and that Shiu only existed in her own fantasy. He is a person who fantasizes about helping himself in order to defeat Kana, just like those stories. "Shiu," Yuto looked at Shirley with a strange look, and asked with confusion, "He left? Didn't he tell you?" "Let's go," Shirley's voice suddenly paused. "Yes, I left in the morning. You were still sleeping at that time." Shirley was stunned for a moment, then stopped crying in just a few seconds. After thinking about what Shiu said last night, he didn't mention himself at all. He was obviously explaining the future affairs. But why didn't he tell himself? Shirley usually said whatever came to her mind, so she asked Yuto directly. "Then why didn't he tell me he was leaving?" "I only found out in the morning, but you were still sleeping." Yuto seemed helpless when faced with his sister's question, and could only find something to explain casually. After hearing this, Shirley's face seemed to change, her entire expression began to become distorted, and anger spread on her face at a speed visible to the naked eye. "Fix." Seeing Shirley gritting his teeth, Yuto finally understood why Shiu left without telling her. "Set the time back to before 6 o'clock. At this time, Shiu had already packed up all his things and was fully equipped, while Baoba and Yuto were standing beside him. "Are you leaving?" "You know, I had no choice." When he heard that Shiu was leaving, Yuto looked a little depressed. In just a few days, Shiu impressed him with his almost omnipotent strength and rich accumulation of knowledge. Especially after he knew Shiu's origin, he felt even more powerful about this person. But he also understood that Shiu couldn't stay for a long time, and after thinking about it, he relaxed his mood. Shiu didn't say much about leaving and said with a smile, "Don't be like this, I didn't know. I thought you were that guy from Shirley." Yuto was used to Shiu's sometimes escaping, so he just smiled. Shiu extended his fist towards Yuto and said, "See you in the future." "Yes." Yuto smiled and raised his hand, touching it lightly. "Goodbye." "Let's go." Baobaba on the side intervened, and then released Hude from the elf ball. The last sentence, Shiu smiled and raised his hand, then patted Yudu on the shoulder and said in a strange tone, "You are you." As soon as he said this, he disappeared, along with Baoba and Hude, leaving only Yudu stunned on the spot. "I don't know what happened, but it felt like a long time had passed since I teleported this time, but it seemed like it was in an instant. Anyway, when I was waiting to come out, my head was a little dizzy, like riding a roller coaster." But Baoba didn't react at all. It was normal now, and he still didn't forget to investigate Chiu's words just now. "Why are you telling Yuto that? What did I say? Why don't I remember?" Chiu held his forehead with one hand, looking like he hadn't fully recovered yet. Baoba looked at Chiu like that, chuckled lightly and said, "I'll send it here. What happens next depends on your ability." Chiu originally looked painful, but recovered in the blink of an eye, asking and answering himself while looking at the surrounding environment. "Where is this place?" Pallet Town. Baoba didn't mean to answer him, and Alakazam took him away with a teleport, leaving Xiu alone standing on the side of the road. However, Xiu was well prepared. He knew very well that Baoba would not show up, because this matter was none of his business, and there was no reason to owe him a favor. Besides, the two people might not know each other. It is unrealistic to rely on others for some things. As he approached along the road, the appearance of the town began to show. Compared with the quick glance just now, Xiu now found some interesting things. From a distance, you can see a landmark building at the end of the town, a windmill. Seeing this, Xiu couldn't help but speed up his pace. You know, the most prominent thing in Pallet Town must be the windmill of Oak Research Institute. This scene was directly printed in his mind from the TV that year. It would be a lie to say that he was not excited. You know, the town of Zhengzing can be said to be the starting point of his dream. The silly thing left here and walked for more than 20 years. It can be said that it accompanied him throughout his childhood. The population density of this town is very small, and the distance between houses is very far apart. Most houses have front and back gardens, which are divided by sparse railings. This caught Xiu's attention. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 78. Although he can't say that he has been to many places, he has some knowledge. According to his understanding, ordinary towns are very cramped, and they want to use all the places they can use. This situation can only be alleviated in the city, but it is not much better. The reason is that the radiation range of power is limited. To survive in this place, you must be able to resist the elves and have the ability to deal with various emergencies. The larger the place you can occupy, the stronger the power of this place. In general, there are only 3 forces in a town: Juncha, Joey, Alliance, Company, and Jim. Of course, there are others, such as here. Because Xiu did not find buildings such as the Pokemon Center, Juncha office, Alliance chain stores, and gym in the town. But the fact that people here can have such a leisurely life is enough to show that there is a big Buddha here. Xiu did not linger in this leisurely environment. He continued to walk along the road and soon came to the center of the town. There are a little trace of life here. The houses on both sides of the street are more dense, and commercial elements such as restaurants and shops appear at the same time. But there were also a few people walking on the street at this time, but it seemed that there were mostly old people and children, and there were almost no middle-aged people. Coupled with the leisure revealed by those people, the town of Pallet Town gave Xiu the feeling that it was a place for retirement. Xiu walked silently on the street and observed the people and buildings nearby. Unknowingly, he walked to the end of the town. The surrounding buildings began to be sparse until there were none. Xiu walked across a small bridge and finally came to the small hill with extremely beautiful scenery. Xiu's eyes could not help but meander up along the stone steps until he saw the slowly turning windmill. Is this where Professor Oak is? However, Xiu's footsteps stopped in front of the black iron gate at the foot of the mountain, and the whole person seemed a little hesitant. Xiu also read a lot of Pokemon fan fiction back then, and Professor Oak was often jokingly called the protagonist's godfather at the time. The reason is that most of the novels at that time started with being picked up by Professor Oak or having a relationship as the starting point, and then became the protagonist after a series of operations. In this case, Xiu's godfather is probably Baobab. In the final analysis, it is because Professor Oak's reputation is too great. Whether it is a game, anime, or a special episode, the protagonist may change, but Professor Oak will definitely appear in it. He is an unshakable legend. In fact, based on the existing information, Xiu feels that the time and space he is in should be before the plot begins. After all, the whole society's acceptance of elves is not high, even a little low, and the level of technology is backward, which is about the 1980s and 1990s in his previous life. More importantly, Xiu has not found such a thing as an illustrated book. For this reason, he also specifically asked Baobab and Yuto, and they both said that they had never heard of this thing. In other words, at least the illustrated book has not been popularized, and whether it is the beginning of games, animations, or comics, the illustrated book has already appeared. And now I finally have the opportunity to contact Professor Oak, the beginning of the world-class main line. I don't know if the father of the time traveler is like in the animation. Xiu raised his hand and pushed open the black door, and climbed up the stairs. Only by walking up the stairs can you really see the full picture of the research institute. The location of the institute in Pallet Town is very special. It is basically separated from the town and is quite far away from the area where people live. There are trees all around the hillside, and a small river extends from the mountain around the institute, and finally disappears at the end of the field of vision. The institute covers a large area, but it has only 2 floors, and the windmill is behind the institute. From the front, you can only see the slowly rotating blades. Hello. Is anyone there? Xiu stood in front of the institute and knocked on the door. It seemed that no one paid attention to him. After standing at the door for a while, Xiu gave up temporarily. After all, Professor Oak was not sitting inside waiting for him. Although Xiu had expected the situation, he was still a little disappointed. After a simple thought, Xiu did not leave immediately, but looked around. It is not his style to sit and wait for death. Instead of waiting here, it is better to look around and find some opportunities. Xiu glanced at the surrounding environment, and then walked around the institute to the back. It doesn't feel much from a distance, but after walking around, Xiu can really feel the structure of the institute. The institute actually covers a large area, and more importantly, the style. It looks inside. Xiu soon came to the side, and looking around, there was a large grassland behind the institute, then grass and shrubs, and then a forest. The river was used as a boundary, and on the other side were some mountains made of piled rocks, with only 2 or 3 small trees growing on them. Xiu also saw a small lake, which looked more like artificial excavation than natural formation. Because the location was too obvious, it was impossible for a lake to appear on the flat ground for no reason, so it could only be an artificially excavated pond. He had been to the park, so he could see that many places here had traces of artificial repairs, and this setting was for different elves to live in different habitats. Because he also saw some elves playing on the grass. The elves here are often seen in the wild, and there are no special elves. But the sky is really blue. Xiu looked up at the sky, then slowly closed his eyes, feeling the cool breeze blowing slowly, and suddenly felt relaxed. The pressure accumulated for a long time was dissipating with the wind, and he could feel the faint fragrance of the grass and trees rooted in the soil. Xiu raised his hand as if to hold the breeze, feeling the wind flowing through his fingers, and opened his eyes after a while, smiling and complaining, "I am too impatient. Such a good environment, did not even notice it. I was really blinded by utilitarianism before. The environment here alone makes Xiu feel that it is worth coming here once." Now that Xiu has been purified, he is no longer worried about gains and losses, and even his walking has become stable. When he walked to a rock platform, Xiu put down his backpack and released a few elves. "Come out, everyone." Because they had been told long ago, they were not surprised even if they suddenly appeared in an unfamiliar environment. However, the almost perfect scenery in Pallet Town also attracted their attention. Even Casey couldn't help but open his eyes and look at the surrounding scenery. This is the Pallet Town I mentioned before. To solve Casey's problem, we have to see if this Professor Oak is as powerful as he said. Xiu said as he prepared breakfast for them on the rock platform, and also prepared his own portion. "Come, let's finish our meal first." Xiu put the little lucky egg on the rock platform, and then pushed its exclusive bowl in front of it. With food, the little lucky egg no longer paid attention to Xiu. It held the cobblestone in front of it with its two little hands, and then sat down on the rock. Only then did it drag the bowl in front of itself with its hands, picked up the rations and started eating. At this time, Casey and the others slowly came over. Casey could fly up by himself, and the scyther was just high enough, so it could eat it by lowering its head slightly. This is why he chose this place as the dining table. At least this way, the scyther doesn't need him to feed it. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 79. Hey. Who are you? Why are you here? A voice came from a distance, and Jiu stood up and looked over. He saw an old man pushing a cart walking towards him, and it seemed that he had just come out of the warehouse at the edge of the forest. But the appearance of this person made him a little dazed. The old man was strong, with thick eyebrows and big eyes, and his short gray hair was combed to one side. He wore a purple shirt, casual trousers on the lower body, and a pair of brown round-toed leather shoes on his feet. Of course, the most important thing is that he also has a signature white coat on the outside. There is also a blue pen in the pocket on the chest of the white coat. This is clearly Professor Oak. The appearance is almost exactly the same as in the animation, but the transformation from the two-dimensional image in the animation to the three-dimensional in reality makes him feel unreal. During the short time he was in a daze, the old man had come to him, looked at him curiously and asked, "Which child ran here to play?" Not only Xiu, the reaction of the elves was even greater. Because Casey could sense some of Xiu's emotions, he reacted earlier than other elves. Casey put down the food in his hand, opened his eyes and looked at the old man. Under normal circumstances, Scyther didn't care much about humans, but when he saw the old man, he seemed a little nervous, and the two sickles were unconsciously brought to the front. As for food, he had long forgotten it. Even the little lucky egg looked at the old man with curiosity. The old man's attention was attracted by the elves next to him, and he didn't care about Jiu's reaction at all, and talked to himself. It's actually a little lucky egg, which is rare. Why does this scythe look so strange? Why does this Casey seem to be wrong? Xiu listened to the old man's evaluation of his elf and didn't say anything. In fact, he reacted a long time ago, but he didn't know what to say when he suddenly met him. If you don't know Professor Oak's temperament, it's better to say less, so as not to say more mistakes. After all, not everyone is as easy to talk to as Baoba. The Professor Oak in the animation is only for reference. It's wrong to think that the laughing face is Professor Oak. Because Xiu can feel a kind of pressure that is there and not there when facing him, which is something he has never felt on Baoba. In other words, the man in front of him is very dangerous. Xiu's own feelings have never been wrong. Compared with appearance, he is more willing to follow his feelings. As he spoke, the old man turned his head to look at Xiu and said strangely, "The strangest thing is you. You are still alive and kicking at this level." Oshio frowned when Professor Oak said this. It was not because of his evaluation of his physical condition, but from this sentence, it can be seen that Professor Oak is not a good person. If he is really as amiable as in the animation and games, he will definitely not speak like this. But Xiu's frowned brows soon relaxed. Although it is different from the impression of Professor Oak, he can become the champion of the first league meeting and has the title of Professor Oak now. Now this situation seems more normal. After all, this is a very appropriate show of power. The old man saw Xiu from frowning to expressionless and finally smiling. He saw the series of changes in his eyes. For a moment, he actually felt that the child in front of him seemed to be a little interesting. "Hello, I am Xiu, I guess you are Professor Oak." Xiu had long lost his restraint and became calm. The reason is very simple. It is best to act smart in front of smart people. Yes, I am Professor Oak. The old man nodded, and looked at Chiu with a little more curiosity. I just heard that the doctor's research on elves is extremely in-depth, so I came here to visit the doctor. But Chiu looked at the elves on the side and continued, I don't agree with the doctor's evaluation of my elves. Interesting. I thought you came to me for help. Dr. Oak put down the cart in his hand, then walked in front of Chiu and observed carefully for a moment, and said, you won't be much better if you continue like this. Hearing this, Chiu knew that his cleverness had been discovered. Originally, Chiu planned to lead the topic to Casey to see if he could get anything out of her, but Dr. Oak seemed to have been prepared and ignored him at all. Doctor, do you think there is something wrong with me? Since the covert approach doesn't work, let's just do it openly. At this point, Chiu no longer has any luck. He can feel that the doctor's attitude towards him is not good. That's right, Chiu feels that he may have been annoyed by those visitors for a long time. For researchers, being disturbed by people with ulterior motives every day is indeed a very strange thing for him. It's a big problem to be very good to yourself. But Dr. Oak's next sentence caught him off guard. Do you want to come to my house and sit down? Huh, Chiu felt it was incredible. Just after a long paragraph of analysis of your personality and attitude, you completely denied it in one sentence. Your Casey is very strange. I can't say for sure, maybe she is a good research subject. The doctor has already set his sights on Casey at this time, and added, because I haven't seen this situation with my own eyes. Looking at Dr. Oak, who seems to have discovered some rare research materials, Chiu feels that Baoba is much more reliable than him. At least it won't be used as research material. In the end, Chiu still accepted the invitation. After all, the achievement laughing and talking has been completed, and the next step is a deeper communication. He also wants to know what Casey's problem is. He must find out and solve this problem no matter what. But Chiu still doesn't know what the examination is about. What if it is a biopsy? So he has to make it clear, otherwise Chiu will not let Casey take the examination. Another selfish thing is that Chiu wants to see what is different about the research institute. It's not the time yet. Let's talk about it after I finish my work. The doctor did not take Chiu to the research institute immediately, but pushed the cart to the other side of the house. Chiu habitually asked, do you need my help? Originally just a polite remark, but unexpectedly, Dr. Oak stopped after hearing it, and turned back to look at Chiu with interest. Then come and help, my old bones are so tired. Dr. Oak put down the cart and pretended to rub his shoulders. Chiu knew he was fooled when he saw the faint smile on his face. However, Chiu did not hesitate, took the cart beside him, and followed Professor Oak to walk in the backyard. In fact, he was distributing the elf rations on the cart to the elves. Adventurer of the Elf World. Author, Wu Nangkuang Song. Chapter 80. Have you ever been involved in similar work before? Professor Oak watched Chiu distribute rations with ease. He seemed to be very normal in contact with the elves on the field, not like a novice at all. It is normal for Oak to have such doubts. Don't think that you can just push a cart of rations out of the warehouse and put them there. First of all, different types of rations correspond to different elves. There are carnivorous ones, vegetarian ones, and omnivorous ones. There are many things to pay attention to here. There are also some elves approximate food intake, some like to eat together, some like to eat alone, etc. There are explanations, and it is not just a matter of putting them there. There are also some that do not eat regular rations. A large part of grass-type elves do not need rations. They eat by basking in the sun. What they need to replenish is water. Fortunately, Chiu has come into contact with these in the park. Every time he was pulled to work as a coolie at the rescue station, he did not complain there. Instead, he summed up his own set of methods in observation. When he encountered something he did not understand, he just asked the breeders in the same industry for advice, and generally he could get the answer. Xiu is familiar with many young ladies in the park because he often goes to help them with their work. This is Xiu's thinking as an adult. He is not bound by the job of picking up garbage given to him by the park. Instead, he looks for opportunities and uses his job to learn and grow. I have been in the wilderness area of Fuchsia City for a while, and taking care of elves is a common thing. Xiu did not mention his specific working time and position in the park, but just mentioned it in passing. In this way, in the eyes of Oak Sueshan, Xiu is an experienced backbone member. Although this is easy to be exposed, he is not wrong. Even if he is wrong, it is your own problem. This is not a rhetoric, but a little cleverness. It's okay. Dr. Oak's appearance is not at all what Xiu expected, but he seems to be smiling. Although this is the case, it is also within Xiu's expectations. After all, this level is like a novice in his eyes. Of course, he doesn't look down on the gap. Xiu did not continue to brag about his ability, but worked hard, picked up the shower that had been prepared on the side and watered the grass on the ground. Several walking grasses closed their eyes and stretched out the leaves on their heads to welcome Xiu, and when water drops fell on the leaves, they would make a faint sound. Just like a thirsty person suddenly drank a large glass of water, with an expression of enjoyment on his face. Seeing this, Xiu also smiled. Facing such a cute creature that had no suspicion of him, Xiu felt more relaxed than ever before. Professor Oak on the side nodded when he saw this scene, holding his chin with one hand, and then murmured, "Well, good affinity. These Pokemons are not something that everyone can contact like this. If it were an ordinary person, he might be more afraid than the Pokemons, and ordinary trainers simply couldn't take care of so many Pokemons. Except for himself, few people could make them like this." Xiu followed Professor Oak and spent almost an hour to completely deal with the Pokemons in the backyard. And the time was just after 9 o'clock. Let's go inside to talk." Professor Oak opened the door and walked into the research institute, and Xiu naturally followed quickly. After bringing him into the living room, Dr. Oak asked Xiu, "What do you want to drink? There are only tea and water in the institute." "Please, doctor, water will do." Xiu sat on the sofa and nodded to Dr. Oak. Dr. Oak turned around and left the hall after hearing this. Only then did Xiu relax a little and began to look around carefully. The hall was quite spacious, with a pink carpet underneath, and then two orange sofas facing each other. In the middle of the sofas was a coffee table with some magazines about elves on it. Behind one sofa was a window, and behind the sofa opposite was a large wall-mounted bookshelf filled with books. There was also a table connected to the bookshelf on the side near the door, and on the table was an old-fashioned computer. There were also some potted plants and photos hanging on the wall as decorations in the hall, so it didn't look very monotonous. Here soon Dr. Oak came in with 2 cups and placed them on the coffee table. "Thank you." Xiu took the cup and held it in his hand, then asked, "Doctor, what do you think is wrong with Casey? What kind of examination is needed?" "Don't worry about that, let's talk about why you came here first." Dr. Oak picked up the cup and leaned on the sofa. Xiu hesitated for a while before putting down the cup. "I came to seek help, because my Casey is different from ordinary Casey, it is innate." Xiu roughly talked about Casey's situation and Baoba's previous examination results and guesses. Baoba Dr. Oak's expression was a little strange, and he said, "He is the world's top breeder, and his understanding of the body structure of elves is better than mine. Now it's useless for you to find me for a problem that even he can't solve." Xiu looked a little embarrassed. After all, Dr. Oak's words were obviously a shirk. Baoba asked him to come to him, which means that Dr. Oak must have alternative means. After thinking for a while, he continued, "Actually, this is not just my problem, it also concerns the doctor." Oh, Dr. Oak seemed a little interested when he heard what Xiu said, and looked like he was waiting for you to perform. Xiu seemed to be calm and asked. What is the doctor studying? Pixies. This is known to the whole world. Is Casey's current situation rare in the world? You are right. Then why did the doctor give up this rare opportunity? Explore and solve Casey's problems. Then you may be the first person to unlock the secret of psychic pixies. Who knew that? After listening to Xiu's words, Dr. Oak just smiled and said casually. But you should know that superpowers are inherently risky, not to mention studying them. What's more, I have so many titles of the first, I don't need this one. Xiu didn't even react for a while. He stared at Dr. Oak for a few seconds before smiling and looking away. Sorry, I'm bothering you. After that, he picked up the water cup and drank it all. Xiu didn't care too much about it. If this way didn't work, he would just change another way. There was no need. In the final analysis, he was self-righteous. Dr. Oak didn't need to help him. What's more, as he said, there were huge risks and dangers in studying superpowers.